So we talk each week at Fellowship Bible Chapel about this convergence of events that seem to be hurtling us towards the end times. Everything seems to be picking up speed. I was just looking back through some things that I had not been able to cover. One of these was, I don't even know if I'm allowed to talk about this up here. I mean, I hear things, maybe I might as well go out in a blaze of glory, right? This is happening everywhere. Somebody showed me a picture of, the bathroom signs at a place where they worked or a store where they shopped in the local area. And this is something I think is probably the most indicative of that we're in the end times, that everybody seems to be able to be what they want to be. You're told that you can be anything that you want to be. You don't even have to be the sex that you're born. The science seems to be against this. I've cited many times a doctor, I think his name is Peter McHugh, who is the head of a psychiatrist at Johns Hopkins, which did the first sex reassignment surgery on planet Earth. They stopped doing these about 10 or 15 years ago at Johns Hopkins because it didn't work. People were still the same biological sex after the operation that they were before. Yet we live in a culture where we think that we can play God with the most basic of biology, and this is Tower of Babel type stuff. I don't have a slide for it, but and now you have this law that essentially, if I understand it correctly up here, you can't say what the Bible says without being labeled a bigot or even prosecuted for it, as I understand it. And this is coming to America. They just enacted a law in California that only applies in nursing homes right now, but if you're a nursing home worker and someone says they're transgender, you have to refer to them by the pronoun that they want to be referred to by. And if you don't, you can be fined and face up to a year in jail for not doing that. It's absolute insanity. I heard a lady on a radio show recently, she called in and she said, I saw a child, 10 years old, 10, 11 years old, with the child's mother. Half the hair was pink, half the hair was bright yellow, had on a shirt and a tutu. So I asked the child, are you a boy or a girl? And he ran away crying because the question, I guess, had offended his sensibilities. And she said, well, for one, I just want to know what I should refer to this child as a male, him or her, or something else. And you can't even ask that question now. I saw someone posted on my Facebook timeline today that they work with millennials. And this is a common problem with millennials, that if you criticize them at work, they go into total meltdown and you can't get anything done. And I know there are some younger people here, so I'm not criticizing you because there are good people. But the culture has changed because we've raised this whole culture of people that you can be anything that you want to be. And this is real Tower of Babel stuff. And with regard to this bill, it says the bill adds gender expression and gender identity to Canada's Human Rights Code and to the Criminal Code's hate crime section. With the Senate clearing the bill with no amendments, it requires only royal assent in the House of Commons to become law. Now, I don't understand how my understanding is that this is law. Critics warn that under Bill C-16, Canadians who deny gender theory could be charged with hate crimes, fined, jailed, and compelled to undergo anti-bias training. Foremost among the critics is University of Toronto psychology professor Dr. Jordan Peterson, who along with lawyer D. Jared Brown told the Senate committee that Bill C-16 is an unprecedented threat to freedom of expression and codifies a spurious ideology of gender identity in law. And I've seen Dr. Jordan Peterson I think he's an atheist, is my understanding. He's conservative. He's at the University of Toronto, and he speaks out about these issues, and he's ridiculed in academia. I saw a response that was tweeted, I guess this was back in June, by this person who has been elected to be your prime minister, that he was very excited about the passage of this bill. Jordan Peterson reacted that it was essentially in codifying, it was compelling speech. You have to say a certain thing. We run into this problem in the States. I don't know how much you follow what goes on in the States. Are you aware of these cases that we have where someone has been asked to bake a cake or conduct a photography or do video for a same-sex marriage and they refuse and they've been fined? Some have been put into bankruptcy. I think there was a couple that owned a bakery down in Oregon that's been put into bankruptcy by this. It's just absolute insanity. It is Tower of Babel type stuff. It is people that want to be anything that they want to be. It is very dangerous. I see that in connection with this, the Human Rights, the General Assembly, the Human Rights Council has gotten into this, and they're pushing for the same gender non-identity everywhere. It doesn't make any sense. I remember when my nephew was 4 years old, he spent a lot of time with his mother and two sisters. The father was they had been divorced, and he came over one day, and I said, let's go play miniature golf. So we went down to the local miniature golf course, and 4 years old, about halfway through, he puts his hands on his hips, and he looks around and he goes, you know, Uncle John, this is pretty cool. Sometimes guys just got to be with guys, no girls. And I thought it was very cute, and I thought that's very profound that what he said, that he recognized that importance. And I joked with him, he finally, at the age of 33, finally got married. I think you took that guys just got to be with guys thing a little bit too far for too long, and I'm glad that you're over it now. But the world and culture stands in direct opposition to what Jesus said. You know, Jesus himself identified the fact that God made male and female. God set the order in place. And all of what this is about is ultimately society, culture, governments shaking their fist in the face of God. Jesus said that it would be like the days of Lot before he came. And I really think we're there. I'm not sure, I've asked the question, I don't think that Lot had to put up with all the same-sex marriage nonsense that we do. And 2 Peter talks about the fact that Lot, when he looked at what was going on, he felt oppressed in his spirit by the licentious conduct going on in front of him. And so that's a good check for us. If we feel the same way, then I think that's a good check for us in terms of that we're on the right track with God. Just a couple more things I want to talk about. Here's your Prime Minister just this week announcing that this gender identity and these gender issues are going to be a big deal at the G7 summit, which Canada is going to host in the spring in Quebec. It's incredible. I mentioned this article in one of my other talks that people see all of these things going on. This is the front page of USA Today on October 4th. Disasters, nuclear threats, shootings. How much horror can we handle? A growing fear, what's next? Here's the end of the article. And look, when they did a good job, they cited a video that Kirk Cameron had done talking about this. And this is the end of the article. Is Judgment Day at hand? Several who studied the question had set the date at September 23. But as the day passed and the tribulations continued, some didn't need obscure scriptural passages or complicated astrological projections to feel the end was near. That's one theology. Another is held by Reverend Ryan Moore of First Presbyterian Church in Tulsa. He told the Tulsa World that he doesn't spend much time trying to predict when the end is coming because the daily faith matters more. But with all that's going on in the world, he admits, you can't help but be a little apocalyptic. And one of those situations was this shooting in Las Vegas this week. Now, I don't purport to know what happened. I don't know if you read what's on Facebook about this shooting, but apparently television shows like Crime Scene Investigation have made everybody in the world a forensic expert to analyze these things. And the conspiracy theories are running rampant. And maybe there's more people. I personally think there's probably, it's hard for me to believe that the guy did this all on his own. I have trouble with that. But I'm not sure it's a complicated, overblown New World Order type thing. We have these shootings pretty regularly in the United States. Everybody says that whenever they happen, they're going to come and get our guns. But they haven't come and gotten them yet. So even with some of the horrific shootings. And they're gonna ask for this, they're gonna do this. But you know, Vegas is a perfect place for this to happen. I think there's good indications that this guy might be related to ISIS in some fashion. They came out and took responsibility for it very early on, which they usually don't do if they're not involved. So the fact that they came out and did that indicates to me that there's probably something there. But I would just urge the Christians that I'm reading that have, everybody's obsessed with finding out how this happened. Everybody cites excited utterances that people made. For example, there's bullets flying around and people ran into other hotels to get away and said, they're shooting. And then people in that hotel think, oh, they're shooting in our hotel. And everybody says there were all of these hotels where shooting was going on, and I've not seen any evidence of that yet. And so I think, having been involved in some pretty detailed investigations in my career as a lawyer, there's a lot of misinformation early on in these things. I remember when 9/11 happened, I was sitting at home. I was actually supposed to go to Boston the next day. And of course, everything got canceled because of the terror attacks that day. And there were all kinds of reports. I had friends that were in D.C. and they were saying that there were bombs going off in downtown D.C. and trash cans and all this. And there was never any evidence of that because everybody just got super excited. So I would just encourage everybody to see how this plays out. I have no doubt that there are people out there that want to control everything, but I also have no doubt that to this point they've not been particularly good at it in controlling everything. And when it's time for these final things to unfold, God will pull back his protection and it will unfold. And so I acknowledge that people have been trying for a long time. One of the areas that is of, I think, some concern is this artificial intelligence. I mentioned in my talk that some things I've mentioned that I know I didn't do online, I've just talked about them. All of a sudden, something like that appears in my Facebook feed. Maybe they just got lucky. I don't know if they're watching or not. But Putin was saying this week to a tech conference in Russia that whoever controls artificial intelligence will control the world. The gains that are being made in that area are exponential. With quantum computing and everything, you're talking about computers and chips that are millions of times more powerful than things that are in place right now that could come online very quickly. How quickly they will do it, how well they will do it, I don't know yet. That's something that remains to be seen. I know that Christians, we often talk about this, about how does this relate to the mark of the beast? And the interesting thing is that now they're coming up with facial recognition technology that doesn't even require a chip or a barcode to be worn. They will just be able to identify you everywhere by your face. But in the wrong hands, someone will be able to use this to control the population. We used to watch a show called Person of Interest, and it was all about this, like a giant supercomputer and facial recognition and predicting whether people were going to do crimes or not. And as they're looking through investigative databases, especially with the shooting in Las Vegas, they're going to analyze that data and use it as a predictor as to who they need to be watching. And there's good to that and there's bad to that. But Apple's coming out with this facial recognition, and there's always a good side to it. My wife will tell you, I have a tendency to leave things places. Today, we decided to go run down to Dairy Queen and get a ice cream cone. And we got back pulling in the car, and I went to pull my wallet out. I left my wallet sitting on the counter down at the Dairy Queen. And bless the heart of the wonderful little counter person there who had gone through and counted how much money was there and what credit cards were there, and she was doing an inventory of my wallet. So she probably knows what my life is about. You know, she probably knew that, I was eating at some fast food places this week. And it's very easy. I'm an attorney, and we gather information on people. We want to know what they think before we take a deposition, before we question them under oath. And with social media now and the ability to get people's emails produced to you in advance, it's very easy to build a lot of detail about what a person's life is. I was investigating a very large case, and I quickly became aware that one of the men involved was having an affair with somebody else in the company, because I was seeing the emails that were going back and forth. And it's very easy for people to get to know everything about you. Listen to this little report from Fox Business the other day as they interviewed somebody about what kind of data is being gathered on everybody here. Whoops.
Around for technology giants like Amazon, Google, and Apple. Amazon this week unveiling a collection of new products that incorporate its Alexa platform, including a smarter Echo. Joining us right now, right here in the studio, is Arun Sundararajan. Good to see you. He is the author and professor of information operations and management at the NYU Stern School of Business. Arun, it's good to see you. Thank you so much for being here.
Great to have. Thanks for having me.
All right, so where do these technology giants stand in artificial intelligence? We've been talking this morning about how AI is in virtually every industry. Machine learning. Yeah. Explain.
Well, on the technology, Google is probably ahead of the rest. But in terms of integrating retail into the interfaces of tomorrow, Amazon's got a head start because they've integrated intelligent response into these Echo devices that are more widespread than Google's Home. And so you're able to order stuff by speaking to your device. And that's really the interface of the future. It's sort of like mobile was 5 years ago. If I look forward 10 years, we'll be speaking to our devices rather than pressing them. All of these services, healthcare, retail, will be integrated tightly into this intelligent device. And so Apple, Google, and Amazon are all battling to be the device that you talk to.
This is incredible. Is there a downside to this?
Well, I think that the concern that I would have if I was an application provider that wasn't one of these platforms is when you have this kind of tighter integration, it gives a natural advantage to the platform. Maybe I'm not going to install my own retail app. If Walmart is integrated into my Google Home, I'm just going to shop at Walmart. I may not even choose the retailer that I go to. I might just say, order me batteries, or order me toilet paper.
The downside.
We're doing less and less.
Millennials will not know what to do with their thumbs, once we're using voice.
I'm deeply, deeply concerned about that.
We're not even tying our sneakers.
All of the strength that we've built up.
At what point... Apple is disappointing to me. At what point will Siri understand what I'm saying? I live in San Diego. The other day I was looking for a restaurant near the San Diego Zoo. I asked Siri, where is the San Diego Zoo? Or directions. It did not understand San Diego Zoo. For God's sakes, millions of people from around the world come to see the polar bears there, and Siri has no idea where it is.
Well, I've got two theories about that. One is that Amazon and Google are just further ahead on the AI technology. The other is that Apple actually wanted you to go somewhere else. And they're sort of trying to guide you.
That's black helicopter conspiracy theory.
Well, you never know.
On that note, though, what about the privacy issue?
Yeah,
Again, the Amazon Echo is on all the time to pick up your voice. It's listening all the time to make sure that when you, hey, Alexa, and what danger lies in these devices being in your home and essentially tracking your every move?
Yeah, right. I'm going to put that in my house.
Yeah, I know. It was in Jeff Bezos' house, and he said, Alexa, buy Whole Foods. She just bought the whole company.
Yeah, well, that's... Jeff Bezos is probably the only person who sort of completely owns all the data associated with, speaking to his Echo device. I think what's going to happen is that consumers are going to segment into two groups. There's going to be a group for whom the privacy concerns are just too high. Because once you've got 10 AI devices in your home, it's really hard to turn them on and off. And so they may just sort of stay out of the whole sort of switches of the interfaces. But a lot of people are just sort of saying, well, the privacy battle is over. We've lost as consumers. We've handed over, think about how much Google and Apple know about you. It's more than any government has known about you in the past.
Unless they give it to the government.
Exactly.
I mean, sort of de facto, we've sort of handed over this authority to the platforms, and we've placed this trust in them. And so I think for a majority of the population, that's just going to be the reality of everyday living.
So I'm a huge libertarian, but I have most of these products.
You do.
I have an Alexa, and I just tell it to order pretty much everything. It does it. But I had privacy concerns, but I almost prefer them having the products and the capabilities than the government. Because I believe that they will protect their customers at the end of the day. I'm more concerned, as Maria noted, of them selling it to the government. And as long as they fight back, because to Apple's credit, anytime the government has tried to push back and get this information that they have, they've went to court about it. There's huge lawsuits about it. Will Amazon do the same thing? Because there's this big push for companies like Facebook and all the other companies to come together to help fight terrorism now.
Well, I think that's a really interesting point you bring up, because in many ways, platforms seem to be the natural heirs to government. We've sort of de facto been delegating a whole bunch of things that we used to delegate to government to platforms. Amazon and Apple control intellectual property. There's a whole bunch of sort of observation capability. Airbnb is sort of in there, sort of regulating short-term accommodation. I think that the personality of the platform, to your question on this, is going to be a critical differentiating factor. I think that Twitter in particular has shown that it'll stand up. Facebook and Google seem to have shown that they'll stand up. But in some ways, these platforms are going to become so big. I mean, I think Denmark recently appointed an ambassador to Silicon Valley. They sort of have recognized that the platforms require the same kind of government relations that a country does, a nation state does.
I think you highlight what I call libertarian hypocrisy, that people freely hand over the most personal details about their lives to these technology companies, and they're fine with that. They're like, sure, make money off of my children's photos, but then when the government needs data to protect the homeland and to fight terrorism, then it's, oh my God, the government's taking my data.
I don't think companies will abuse it.
Well, it's an interesting discussion, and I think it's one that's going to, and I do think it plays into Bible prophecy quite well, this collection of information. And I have to tell you, as one who was in Facebook jail last week for about a week, I couldn't post to groups, I couldn't join groups. I wasn't crushed, but I don't even know what I did wrong. I still to this day, I mean, I think I shared a post about the Heim Report, Jerusalem Journal, and somebody blocked that as, determined that that was spam, or somebody complained about that because it was pro-Israel. I have another friend who's in Facebook jail because she writes articles critiquing Islam and other geopolitical issues. And so I'm very uncomfortable, frankly, with Mark Zuckerberg having my information and using it that way. They're fascists. There is a concerted effort to shut down Christian and particularly conservative Christian voices. And so I would just ask, and we'll start our Q&A here in just a minute, but I would just ask that, you know, I know Jacob has an online presence, our church has an online presence, other speakers that you'll hear at other conferences have online presence. And I think that online presence, we are told, is helpful to some people, but I don't know how long it's going to last. I do know that I've been in discussions with people about some alternative platforms that people are trying to develop that would be able to be used by Christian ministries in the event that Facebook or Google decide to shut everything down. I read an article this morning, a lady she wrote an article, I can't remember what it was about, and Rush Limbaugh read it on his radio show. And she had her channel was monetized on YouTube. In other words, there would be ads that would appear and she would get a percentage of the ad revenue. It was either while Rush was talking about her article and blog and YouTube channel, or shortly thereafter, that Google went in and shut off the monetization on her channel. Now, what are they doing? They're shutting down conservative voices. So if Rush Limbaugh gets on someday and says, hey, I love this Jacob Prasch YouTube channel, they'll just take it down. And I've had friends that this has happened to. They've completely removed everything that they've done from YouTube. Now, what we do at FBC, and I think Jacob does too, is we back it up in other platforms that we can use in the event that we're removed from YouTube. But these people, you don't elect the CEO of Facebook, but you give them all of their information. And I think they're probably more dangerous in some way than the companies. So they put up a show that they resist, but then Facebook's vice president will go to Europe, Sheryl Sandberg, and she'll say, well, yeah, if you governments, if you want us to shut down people criticizing Islam or something like that as hate speech, we're more than willing to go along with that. And you get blocked on Facebook. They want you to use it, but then as long as you use it to further their own particular agenda. So if you're against same-sex marriage and other things, you're skating on the very thin edge of having everything that you do on YouTube or any of these other platforms taken down. And look at the stuff that they leave up. If you've ever looked through it, it's amazing. So the church just needs to be prepared to deal with these particular issues. It's a very exciting time to be alive, though. I think that there's so much that's happening, and it's happening very rapidly. And that's all that I really have for tonight. So I'm going to ask Jacob and Mike to come up.